The way I see it, these readings that we just read and listened to are all about choices. You have Solomon has a choice of what to ask for. It's almost a magic genie scene, isn't it? Where it's like, hey, you have this opportunity. What do you want? So he has a choice of asking for virtually anything. And he chooses wisdom over asking for riches or long life or victory over his enemies. That was his choice. And Paul, in his writing, talks about choosing to be influenced by God, influenced by the Spirit, rather than influenced by the temporal substances of the world. And then Jesus comes along and says, choose me. Choose the true food that I represent instead of the manna of the world. Now, manna, of course, was the miraculous bread from heaven. We know that story. But it was still just bread, regular bread that you eat. And Jesus says there is something more. So we see this, and we don't see choices between good and evil, necessarily. Right? But in all three of these cases, it's between something good and something better. It's between something temporal, maybe what you'd call instant gratification, and something eternal, a sustainable good. A temporary good versus a sustainable good. And this is where Jesus is going when he calls himself true food. Now, when I see the words true food, I think of a restaurant. It's a restaurant in the plaza called True Food. Am I remember that correctly? So you can be a Christian or you can just go to that restaurant. That's totally up to you. True food. We know what they're getting at when they say true food, right? There's farm to table, there's organic. It makes me think of a Portlandia episode. Anybody watch that show, Portlandia? A few? Well, you know, whether you've seen the show or not, you may have some sense of the reputation of a place like Portland and its interest in organic and farm-to-table foods and what they would call, true food. And what we might call that too. But I'm remembering that scene, that sketch that they had in Portlandia where they come, and I think this was like the pilot episode. This couple comes into the restaurant and the waiter's telling them the specials, and there's a chicken special. So they're asking questions about this, and I have to look at my paper for this because it's too much. So the waiter mentions, well, it's a heritage breed, woodland raised, fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy, and hazelnuts. And so these are very inquisitive diners, and they say, well, is it local? Well, yeah. Okay, well, is it organic? Is it Oregon organic, or is it USDA organic? So, and are the hazelnuts local? I mean, the chicken could be local, but are they feeding the chicken local hazelnuts or hazelnuts from somewhere else? And then how big is the area for the chickens to roam? I mean, you say free range, but I mean, is it like in a room or... So the answer is the chickens have 4 acres to range. So that's good, that's acceptable. And the chicken's name was Colin. And here are the papers, and here's a photo of the chicken so that so you have that. But there's more questions. Like, did the chicken have friends? Was it a positive, healthy, affirming environment for the chicken or not? And did you have a good relationship with the chicken grower? Or is this one of those farms that's just cashing in on the organic trend? Do you know these people? And the server does a great job answering all these questions, but still in the end they decide, you know what, we need to go visit that farm. So I think they just forget about dinner altogether and they just get up and leave. Like, we're going to go visit this farm. And that's how the sketch ends. So if we're talking about true food, it's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, obviously. And I don't think that's what Jesus means when he talks about true food. In fact, he kind of goes a completely different direction with it, saying things like, eat my flesh and drink my blood, which would be horrifying and revolting, except that I think we're mostly aware that he's talking about the Eucharist, the bread and the wine. Right? That this is the choice that he's reaching out to you to make. Choose something eternal over something temporal. Just like Solomon chose wisdom over these other things. And when we see the contrast there, he had all of these needs. He knew that these other things were good and important for ruling a nation, for being a king. He knew if you ask for riches, then you're rich. If you ask for long life, then you die at an advanced age, and that's good. If you ask for victory over your enemies, now you have no enemies. But no matter what need you try to fill with that request, you still just met the one need. It's like asking for a loaf of bread in a famine. That's a good thing, and that meets one need, but there's still so much more. And so Solomon, in this moment, realizes there is one thing that can meet every need, that wisdom can bring about wealth. Wisdom can bring about longer life, but also better life. Asking to vanquish your enemies, you may not have enemies anymore, but wisdom can rid you of your enemies not through war, but through love. And so Solomon is thinking in terms of the sustainable good, just as Jesus is. When he instructs us in the Eucharist saying, my blood, my body, choose me. All of these other things are good, and you should take advantage of them, but don't let them distract you from what's eternal. And there's this, it kind of reminds me of the saying that you're all familiar with, teach a person to fish. Well, it starts with give a person a fish, and they'll eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, and they'll eat for a lifetime. Well, I want to take it one step further. Teach a person to teach, and you feed the world. And that's the mindset that I've tried to take as we've had these classes this summer, and I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had. And we specifically had our confirmation class that was very well attended, and it ended recently, which is good because we have these confirmations this Wednesday, and I'll talk about that in the announcements. This Wednesday evening with baptism and confirmation and reception. But we've had such great conversations in these classes, and there's one topic particularly that came up that I thought was worth kind of airing out in a sermon. And that was about the Eucharist. So this is great timing to talk about it because Jesus is instructing us. This is the true food. This is the eternal food. My body, my blood. But apparently, there's a rumor going around that not every Christian agrees about exactly how that works. Does that seem? I mean, I figured it was obvious, right? But apparently over the centuries, people have gotten different ideas about it, about exactly what's happening with that bread when it's given and what's happening with that blood. So rather than just talk more and more and more about these old ideas, I want to do a little demonstration. And I've got some volunteers who are ready. I needed 3, and we have 3 youth, so I just took advantage of that. And I'm going to have Isabel and Jonathan and Corbin come and stand right here. I like that enthusiasm. That's good. But I'm going to have you face the people. Even better, right? And here, Isabel, let me have you stand in the middle right here. Jonathan, I'm going to put you where Isabel is. And Corbin, if you'd come and stand right here. All right, and you guys know which direction to look? Do you remember? All right, you got it. Okay, so Jonathan and Isabel and Corbin represent 3 communicants, 3 people who have come forward to receive communion. And is your face tired already? There you go, that's better. All right, you see Jonathan and Isabel are looking up to represent that they have approached with an attitude of seeking and of respect and self-examination, which is what the Eucharist is called for. Now, Corbin has never had this attitude before, but he's playing a role, so I appreciate it. So this is communicant A, person B, and person C for reference. Now, person C does not have the right attitude. Person C has come with sort of selfish and entitled and not examining himself at all, and try not to laugh. Too late. So here you see the contrast, okay? So now they're receiving communion, and I'm going to go in this direction. Corbin and Isabel. And I just ran out of consecrated hosts. I ran out of what I was holding, so I got to go to the reserve, right, and get what's in there. But, oopsie, I grabbed a non-consecrated host. This one, I had forgotten that this got mixed in, and so I hand Jonathan a non-consecrated host, which is definitely not what I should do. I get a slap on the wrist for that. So, my question for you then, and we can have this is a very different sermon. It's summer, we can get away with some things. My question for you is, of these three, and we know who they are, so if your necks are getting tired, you can just look forward if you want. Of these three, who is Jesus present with? Man, you guys are smart. I thought I was going to trick you with that one. No, it's a trick question. Jesus is present with all of them because God's love is unconditional, right? Even through our mistakes or our attitudes or whatever, Jesus is present. So I'm going to ask a different question. Of these three, who receives the benefit of Jesus' presence? Who experiences the real presence of Christ in the sacrament, in the Eucharist, under these conditions? No, that's not quite what I'm getting at with this question. This one's a little trickier. Who genuinely experiences that and benefits from Jesus being with them, given what they have to work with here? I think we can probably all agree Isabel's got it, right? Because she has the right attitude and she has a consecrated host, so you can sit down. But now, so person B is clear, but person A and person C, what do we do with this? Switch the hosts. All right, now that you spoke up, I'm going to ask for more from you, Jolene. What do you think is happening here? Who's really experiencing the presence of Christ and benefiting from him being with them? You think so? I think, what's that? That's very true. But what if this was you? And now it is between you and God. You know, and you think, if it was told you afterwards, oh, I got a non-consecrated host. Right. Or if it's between you and God, what if you are the one coming in with it? I've had a bad attitude, even sometimes on a Sunday. What's that? Yeah? Right. And if we know and if we recognize it, then we do that. Absolutely. Okay, you guys can sit down. Thank you. Let's give our volunteers a round of applause. I'll put these back in here. Now, it's my job not to let that happen, as I said. I have a responsibility here, and, you know, as much as I possibly can, I'm going to make sure that the way we conduct ourselves with the sacrament is faithful to the story that we've received, faithful to this community, this Episcopal community that we're part of. But I can't promise to never make a mistake. You don't have any control over whether I might mess up at that sometime. We don't have control over others. We don't have control over our environment. What's the one thing we do have control over? Ourselves and the attitude that we're bringing with us, right? And I'm gonna go a little bit, I'm gonna push the boundary a little bit here and say that the power is not in the magic words that I say in the Eucharistic prayer. The power is not in these gestures that I make over the elements. Those are a matter of faithfulness. It's something that I have agreed to do and something that's a part of who we are. So we do that and we rejoice in that. But that's not where the power is. The power is in you. The power is in your heart. And when God created you in the divine image, God intentionally made a powerful heart that can make that choice, like Solomon's choice for wisdom, or like the choice Jesus is calling us to partake in true food. And what makes it true food? It's not this. And it's not magic words. It is the heart that we bring to it. And you have a heart that is so powerful, it can overcome the failures of a priest, the mistakes of a priest. Your heart can make an invalid wafer valid. It can make an invalid chalice valid, because Jesus is no less present with you because of that technicality than if it hadn't happened. And I think that is something that we miss out on sometimes when we get hung up on procedurals, on details. That it is the heart. The heart is the sacrament. And when we're presented with these choices for the temporal good, everything physical and substance around us is good, but it is a temporal good. And Jesus is saying there's something truer, something higher, something more eternal. And I haven't placed it outside of you to go and find. I haven't put it in an instruction manual. I've put it in your heart. God says, I wrote my word upon your heart, because that's where the power is. So as we, every week, and this morning, as we come forward to receive the true food and the true drink of Jesus, we are always called upon to examine our hearts. And as you do that this morning, I encourage you to look at the power that's within. To know that you have control over that, and you have the ability to make a choice. God has never been prevented from being present with us by a mistake. God has never been forced to be present with us because we did it correctly. And yet God has implanted that power in our hearts to invite God in or to resist. And I'm encouraging you this morning, as you examine that powerful heart, to make the choice to connect. Amen.